We'd been planning this trip for months, just me and my 3 best friends, Ethan, Sarah, and Mike. The perfect escape, a weekend away from everything, out here at this remote lake, miles deep in the woods. No cell service, no distractions, just us and nature. It was exactly what we needed. The lake itself was beautiful, calm, clear water, reflecting the trees and sky like a mirror. It felt untouched, almost too peaceful. We set up camp right by the shore, laughing, talking about how we'd been waiting for this all summer. It was supposed to be simple, just swimming, hiking, maybe a little stargazing on the water. But as we settled in that first night, something about the silence around us felt different. Sarah mentioned she'd heard some local stories, people disappearing from this lake over the years, bodies never found. Just old rumors, she said, nothing serious. We all laughed it off, called it superstition. But for a moment, I couldn't shake the weird feeling that we were being watched. I shrugged it off. After all, it was just a story, right? The second night was even better than the first. We'd spent the day hiking, swimming, just soaking in the sun. By the time the sun dipped below the treeline, the sky was a deep, inky black, speckled with stars. Ethan suggested we take the boat out onto the lake, do a little stargazing. It sounded perfect. We paddled out, the water smooth as glass beneath us, not a ripple in sight. The reflection of the stars on the surface made it look like we were floating in space. Sarah leaned back, staring up at the sky, while Mike cracked jokes about constellations, trying to sound smart. We were all laughing, the kind of easy, carefree laughter that comes when you feel completely at peace. But then, the conversation died down, and an eerie quiet set in. The only sounds were the soft creaks of the boat and the gentle lapping of water against the hull. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper, like someone murmuring just out of earshot. I wasn't sure at first, so I didn't say anything. Then Mike heard it too. "Did you guys hear that?" he asked, chuckling nervously. We all laughed it off at first, blaming it on the wind or our tired minds playing tricks. But then I saw something just below the surface, a dark, shifting shape, too large to be a fish. My stomach tightened. "Did you see that?" I whispered, but no one responded. The mood shifted. Sarah sat up quickly. "Maybe we should head back," she said, her voice tense. But before we could even turn the boat, something slammed into us from underneath. The whole boat rocked violently, nearly tipping. Sarah screamed, and Ethan scrambled for the paddles. My heart pounded in my chest. Whatever was down there, it wasn't done with us. The boat lurched again, harder this time, and panic spread like wildfire. Sarah clutched the side, her knuckles white, eyes wide with fear. The whispers weren't distant anymore. They were all around us, swirling like the wind, but no one was speaking. My heart raced as I peered over the edge, and that's when I saw them. Shadows, humanoid shapes swimming beneath us, too close, too real. They moved slowly, circling just beneath the surface. "Start the motor," Mike shouted, his voice shaky as he fumbled with the engine. But it wouldn't turn over no matter how hard he pulled the cord. Come on," he muttered through gritted teeth. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, like voices speaking just below the water, but I couldn't make out the words. Ethan grabbed a paddle, his face pale, and started rowing frantically. "We need to get out of here," he yelled. The boat rocked again, and this time something broke the surface. A hand, pale and waterlogged. It gripped the side of the boat, its fingers long and bony. It shot up, fast, grabbing Sarah by the arm and trying to drag her overboard. She screamed, kicking wildly, as we all scrambled to pull her back in. We fought it, Mike and I pulling her while Ethan tried to knock the hand away with the paddle. We managed to free her, but in the chaos, Ethan lost his balance. He was there 1 second, and the next something yanked him hard right into the water. His scream cut through the night, echoing out over the lake. I froze, staring down into the water where Ethan had disappeared. That's when I saw it. A pale, skeletal hand gripping his ankle, pulling him deeper and deeper. And then, just like that, he was gone. The whispers, they stopped. All we were left with was the sound of the boat rocking gently in the silence, and the cold realization that whatever took him, it wasn't finished. We didn't say a word as we rowed back, our hearts pounding in our chests. The only sound was the splash of the paddles cutting through the water. None of us dared to look over the edge, terrified of what might still be lurking beneath us. The whispers had stopped, but the silence was worse. It felt like the lake was holding its breath, waiting. When we finally hit the shore, we all jumped out, frantically calling for Ethan. But there was no answer, just the quiet lapping of the water against the rocks, mocking us. Sarah and Mike were trembling, still in shock, but I could feel something deeper settling over me, a horrible weight pressing down on my chest. Ethan was gone, just gone. Later, as we sat around the dying campfire, I couldn't shake the stories Sarah had mentioned. The rumors about people disappearing into the lake, their bodies never found. I realized with a sickening clarity that Ethan wasn't the first, and he definitely wouldn't be the last. Whatever took him was still out there, waiting. As the fire burned to embers, I sat there, alone, knowing that the lake never forgets those it claims, and it's always hungry for more.
I've always felt a pull toward the sea, like it's in my blood. Maybe that's why I chose marine biology. There's something about the mystery of the ocean that captivates me. So when I heard rumors about the wreck at the abandoned marina, I couldn't resist. They said the place was haunted, that the voices of sailors lost at sea could be heard echoing through the water. I figured it was just local folklore, but something about the story stuck with me. I needed to see it for myself. The marina, once lively and full of boats, was now crumbling. The docks sagged into the water, covered in algae and rot. The air was thick with fog, and the smell of salt and decay clung to everything. As I walked closer, my boots creaked against the old worn wood. It was eerily quiet. No gulls, no wind, just the distant sound of waves lapping against the shore. Despite the excitement I felt at the thought of exploring the wreck, there was a growing sense of unease in my chest. This place felt wrong, like something was watching me from the mist. The wreck was worse than I imagined. Half submerged in the shallow water, its once sturdy frame was now a rotting skeleton of wood and metal. Seaweed clung to its hull, and every gust of wind made the old boat creak like it was sighing under the weight of the years. The smell hit me first, a mix of salt water, decay, and something else, something foul that I couldn't quite place. Mist curled around my feet, sticking to my skin like a cold, damp sheet. I stood there for a moment, just staring at it, wondering how many people had seen this wreck and how many had never come back. Then I heard it, the faintest sound, almost like a whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind cutting through the gaps in the wreck, but then it came again, clearer this time. Low, murmuring voices that seemed to be carried by the breeze. But they weren't. They felt like they were coming from beneath the water. My heart raced, but curiosity pulled me forward. I needed to know what was causing it. I pulled out my camera and climbed aboard, the wood groaning beneath my weight. The closer I got to the boat's interior, the louder the whispers became, as if the wreck itself was trying to tell me something. My breath caught in my throat. These weren't just random sounds, they were voices. I couldn't make out the words, but they sounded desperate, like pleas for help or cries from something long forgotten. The deeper I went, the more suffocating the air became. It was like something was watching me, following me through the narrow corridors of the wreck. The voices were louder now, insistent, pressing in on me from all sides. I stopped for a moment listening. Were they closer, or was it just my mind playing tricks? Either way, I was no longer sure I wanted to hear what they had to say. Inside the wreck, the air felt heavier with each step. The deeper I went, the more I realized this place wasn't just a forgotten ruin. It was a tomb. Scattered across the floor were old, rusted objects, remnants of the crew that once sailed this boat. A tarnished pocket watch, a moldy leather boot, a compass cracked down the middle. My fingers traced over them, my mind piecing together their story. This boat had been caught in a storm, a violent one from the looks of it, and no one had made it out alive. The whispers around me seemed to confirm it, growing louder and more agitated as I uncovered their history. The air was thick now, almost choking, as if the boat itself was trying to suffocate me. The sense of dread was overwhelming, pressing down on me like a weight. The voices, once distant and faint, had become frantic, swirling around me, echoing off the rotting walls. They were no longer just whispers. They were desperate, panicked. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I could feel their fear, their anger. It was like they knew I was getting closer to something I wasn't supposed to find. Suddenly, the boat groaned, a deep, low creak that sent a shock of terror through me. The floor shifted beneath my feet, and before I could react, the wreck sank deeper into the mud. I was thrown forward into a narrow cabin, debris crashing down behind me, sealing off the exit. Panic surged through me as I scrambled to find a way out, but every door, every window, was blocked by splintered wood and rusted metal. And then I heard it, clearer than ever before. A voice no longer distant but right behind me. It spoke in a language I didn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable. Cold, deliberate, and far too close. I turned, my heart pounding, but there was no one there. Just the voice, lingering in the air like a shadow I couldn't see, making my blood run cold. As I clawed at the debris, trying desperately to free myself, something inside me shifted. The whispers weren't just random voices, they were calling me. Each frantic murmur was like a thread, pulling me deeper into a truth I didn't want to face. Images flashed in my mind, but they weren't my memories. They were of this boat, of the storm, the chaos, the sinking. And I was there. I could feel the panic, the cold water rising around me, the terror of drowning. That's when I realized I wasn't just some curious student investigating a haunted wreck. Belonged here. I had been aboard this ship, perishing with the others when the storm claimed us all. The pull I'd always felt toward the sea, the voices, the wreck, it was all connected. I wasn't discovering the past. I was remembering it. Water started to pool around my feet, rising slowly but steadily. I cried out, begging the spirits for answers, but the only response was a whisper, colder and clearer than all the rest. You never left. The truth hit me like a wave. I had never escaped. I was trapped here, doomed to relive this moment over and over again, an echo of my own death.
It was just before dawn when I set out, the village still as quiet as a grave. The fog was thick this morning, thicker than usual, but I wasn't worried. After years of fishing these waters, you get used to the unpredictable weather. Some days it's clear as glass. Others it's like the whole world disappears into the mist. Today felt like one of those days. I loaded up the boat with my usual gear, checking my traps and supplies like I always did. The sea was calm, barely a ripple against the hull, but the fog clung to everything, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Still, it didn't bother me. This wasn't the first time the bay had been blanketed like this. As I pushed off the dock, I couldn't help but think of my old man. He fished these same waters before me, went out one foggy morning just like this, and never came back. They said it was the currents, maybe a storm, but part of me always wondered if something else happened out there, something we weren't meant to understand. But I'm not superstitious, never have been. This is just another day, another trip. At least that's what I told myself. The further I went, the thicker the fog became. I could barely make out the bow of my own boat and the usual landmarks. The old lighthouse, the rock formations by the shore, were swallowed by the haze. My compass spun aimlessly, refusing to settle. That was odd. I knew these waters like the back of my hand, but for the first time in years, I felt completely disoriented. It was like the bay was shifting, changing with every turn of the tide. Then I heard it. A faint voice, distant but clear, calling out over the water. At first, I thought I was imagining it, just the fog playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again. A man's voice calling for help. I steered toward the sound, heart pounding. The voice grew louder, but something was wrong. It was too consistent, too steady, like a recording stuck on repeat. I finally spotted the silhouette of a boat drifting in the mist. As I got closer, my gut twisted. There was no movement, no one waving me down, just an empty vessel swaying gently with the current. I pulled alongside, the boats knocking softly against each other. The deck was empty. No crew, no signs of life. A jacket lay crumpled near the wheel, a fishing rod tossed carelessly across the seat. It was like whoever had been here had just vanished. My throat tightened. The voice that had led me here was gone now, replaced by an eerie silence. I looked out into the fog, feeling an unsettling weight settle in my chest. This wasn't right. Something was wrong, but I couldn't place it. I should have turned back then, but I didn't. I kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. There always was, right? I was about to leave the empty boat behind when I heard it. A voice, clear as day, calling my name. Derek! My heart froze. I knew that voice. Couldn't be. But it was. My father's voice, echoing through the fog. I shook my head, trying to snap myself out of it. The stress, the isolation, maybe it was messing with my mind. But then I heard it again, closer this time. Derek, turn back. It was unmistakable now. My hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles white. I hadn't heard that voice in years. Not since he vanished in this very bay. My mind raced, searching for a logical explanation, but nothing made sense. Suddenly, I saw him, standing at the edge of my boat, drenched, pale, his eyes hollow. My chest tightened with a cold dread I couldn't shake. He looked just as he had the day he disappeared, only now, his clothes clung to his skin, soaked as though he'd just come up from the depths. His lips barely moved, but I heard his voice, clear and desperate. Leave now before it's too late. I blinked, and he was gone. Just like that. My breath came in shallow gasps, my heart hammering against my ribs. I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, just the fog playing tricks, but deep down I wasn't so sure. Suddenly, the boat rocked violently, as if something enormous had struck from below. I stumbled, barely catching myself. The sea was still calm, but it felt like the water beneath me was alive, pulling at the boat, trying to tip it over. And then came the sounds. Whispers, faint but chilling, drifting through the fog. I couldn't make out the words, but they felt wrong, like voices not meant for human ears. The creaking of wood followed, but not from my boat. It came from all around me, like the bay itself was groaning in pain. The fog twisted and shifted, tightening its grip, and for the first time, I felt real fear. I tried to steady myself, but deep down, I knew something terrible was about to happen, and I was too far in to turn back now. It hit me all at once, the truth I'd been denying since I set out. This fog wasn't just weather, and these waters weren't just any bay. It was cursed, haunted by the souls of the men who never returned, men like my father. The whispers weren't just echoes. They were voices, those who had been lost to the depths, warning me, pulling at me, and I had ignored them. I could see it now, clear as day in my mind. The bay had claimed them, one by one, every fisherman who thought they could outsmart it, who refused to heed the warnings. My father had been one of them. Now I was next. The fog closed in tighter, suffocating, blurring the lines between sea and sky. The boat lurched violently, as if something beneath the surface had taken hold of it. I gripped the wheel, but it was useless. There was no escaping this. I looked out into the endless mist, my heart heavy with the weight of what I now understood. I wasn't getting out. Not this time. The fog swallowed me whole, and I felt it. Myself fading, becoming part of it. Another soul lost to the bay, like so many before me. Now I belonged to the fog, forever.